Hello students, I am Dr. Vidya Patil, serving as Assistant Professor of English at Government First Grade Women's College, Bidar. I am your English teacher for the BSc First Sem Basic English course. In today's video, we will be taking up another lesson from your textbook, Life Pulse. So, let us now begin with this new lesson. Let us now begin with the fifth chapter, A Teacher Travelogue on What Travel Reminds Me by Nate Bowling. Before we actually begin reading the lesson, let us just try to find out something about the writer or the author. Nate Bowling, the author of this particular lesson, is a high school government teacher in Tacoma, Washington, who was named the 2016 Washington State Teacher of the Year and a finalist for the National Teacher of the Year. So, Nate Bowling, ಇವರು ಒಂದು ಹೈಸ್ಕೂಲ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಹೈಸ್ಕೂಲ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಟೀಚರ್ ಅಂತ ವಾಷಿಂಗ್ಟನ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. He was awarded the 2016 Washington State Teacher of the Year. So, USAದು ವಾಷಿಂಗ್ಟನ್ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ಟೀಚರ್ ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ 2016 ಅವರಿಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿತ್ತು. ಅಂಡ್ at the national level also he had participated until the final rounds. He is also a recipient of the 2014 Milken National Teaching Award and founding member of Teachers United. So, ಬೇರೆನೂ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಅವಾರ್ಡ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ. This is a proof that Nate Bowling is a very good teacher. Now, this particular lesson about the travelogue, a teacher travelogue on what travel reminds me, is a travelogue based on the theme of education, where Nate Bowling reminisces how travel forms an integral part of his life and how it helps and contributes to his ever-evolving worldview. So, ಇದು ಏನ್ ಟ್ರಾವೆಲಾಗ್ ಇದೆ, ಈ ಲೆಸನ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗ ನೇಟ್ ಬೌಲಿಂಗ್ ಅವರು ಟ್ರಾವೆಲಿಂಗ್ ದಿಂದು ಅವ್ರ ಜೀವನ ಮೇಲೆ ಏನ್ ಪ್ರಭಾವ ಆಗಿದೆ ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ we get to know how Nate Bowling has been influenced a lot by traveling and how it is now an integral part of his life. Our ಜೀವನದ ಒಂದು ಅಂಗ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. It is a part of his life because he feels that traveling has helped to shape his views, especially his world view. So ವಿಶ್ವ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದೇನ್ ವಿಚಾರ ಇದೆ, ಅವ್ರದ್ದೇನ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇದೆ, ಇವೆಲ್ಲನೇ ಟ್ರಾವೆಲಿಂಗ್ ದಿಂದ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಇವಾಲ್ವ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. The travelogue also accounts that the frequent summer travel to Western Europe sharpens Nate's understanding of America, his life back home, his priorities, his habits, his aspirations, and above all, his obligation and duty as educator to mold and shape the personality of the students to become an active participants in civil society. So, our frequently summer season nalli Western Europe ಗೆ travel ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. So, whenever he went on these travels to Europe, he used to realize and get a better understanding of his own country. He used to remember about his life back home, and he used to have a proper rethinking about his duty as a teacher and as an educator. So, our ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಅವ್ರ ಟೀಚರ್ ಆಗಿ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ ಏನಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದ್ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಪರ್ಸನಾಲಿಟಿಗೆ ಒಂದ್ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ರೀತಿಯಿಂದ ಒಂದ್ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಒಂದ್ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ರೀತಿಯಿಂದ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು. So he felt that he had a very important role in shaping and molding the personality of his students as a teacher. So generally ನಾವು ಟೀಚರ್ ಅಂದಾಗ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಇಷ್ಟು ಸಿಲೆಬಸ್, ಇದು ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ, ಇದು ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಅಂತ ಪಾತ್ರ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೋತೀವಿ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಟೀಚರ್ದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಪಾತ್ರ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ, ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ದು ಫುಲ್ ಪರ್ಸನಾಲಿಟಿಗೆ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅವನಿಗೆ ಪ್ರೇರಿತ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. A teacher travelogue moralizes why this might be and the need to cultivate curiosity above all else. So in this lesson, he talks about this duty of a teacher of molding the personality of his students and also to keep this curiosity alive in the life of every individual. So let us now read the lesson and try to understand what the writer Nate Bowling is trying to explain to us. And the lesson, this particular note has been written on 29th August 2016. As teachers, we never really stop teaching and learning. Sometimes the venue changes, but we are constantly thinking about how we can apply what we are seeing and experiencing to our practice. This is true, especially during the summer. So Nate Bowling here says that as a teacher, we never stop or there is no end to the process of teaching and learning. It is only that the venue changes. Sometimes you're teaching in the school, sometimes you teach outside the school. But wherever you're going, you're always in that process of either teaching or learning. So he says that even during the summer vacations, this process does not come to an end and it continues to evolve. Travel has become an essential part of my life, and my travel contributes to my ever-evolving worldview. In early spring 2007, halfway through my first year of teaching, my grade school roommate Pete, now a fourth grade teacher in Yakima, Washington, and I hatched a plan to go abroad. As first year teachers, our sole criteria for deciding our destination was cheap airfare. We found a sub $700 flight to Bogota on a now defunct travel site. At age 27, I secured my first passport and took my first non-military trip abroad. So he says that how travel has become an essential part of his life and has helped him evolve as an individual. So traveling ಅವ್ರ ಜೀವನದ ಅಭಿನ್ನ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ ಅಂಡ್ ಈ ಟ್ರಾವೆಲಿಂಗ್ ದಿಂದು ಅವ್ರ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರ ಜೀವನಿಗೆ ವಿಶ್ವಗ್ ನೋಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಬಂದ ರೀತಿನೇ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಬದಲಾಯಿಸಿದೆ. He talks about his experience in 2007 when after joining his job as a teacher and after completing 1 year of his work as a teacher, he and his friend Pete, both of them decided to go on a holiday someplace abroad. Now, because they were newly appointed teachers, their main criteria for selecting a holiday spot was it should be economical. And so they decided to go to Bogota, which had a less than $700 flight ticket. So at the age of 27, he had his own passport and his first trip outside of his country was to Bogota. We spent 4 weeks traveling through Bogota, Santa Marta, Cartagena, and the Caribbean coast. I used my college Spanish for the first time. I sailed for the first time. I hitchhiked for the first time. I went scuba diving for the first time. I bathed in volcanic mud. I ate a fish so fresh out of the water, the fisherman was still unloading the rest of his haul when I began eating it. So he talks about his experience on that first holiday which he had gone to. So he had spent nearly 4 weeks traveling throughout Bogota, Santa Marta, and Cartagena, and the entire Caribbean coast. So now when we talk about Caribbean, it refers to the West Indies islands and the places around it. I used my college Spanish. So little bit of Spanish which he had learned during his college days, he used that here now. He also sailed for the first time. So he went in a sailing boat. He hitchhiked during this holiday. He even went scuba diving for the first time in his life. So he tried out various other things and he like bathing in a volcanic mud and even eating fresh fish which had just been caught by the fisherman. I was hooked. So let us see what he is trying to explain in this paragraph. For the last 10 years, at the end of the school year, I have packed the same red and black backpack and headed abroad. My travel partner has changed, but the ritual remains the same. This summer, I spent 4 weeks with my wife Hope, an English teacher, traveling through Western Europe, Germany, France, Spain, and Portugal. So he now explains as to how since that year in 2007 till now in 2016, so in the past 10 years of his life, every year he has continued with this practice of going on a vacation during the summer holidays. So every time at the end of the school year, he just packed his same backpack and went abroad on a holiday, though his partner has been changing. This particular summer, that is in 2016, he had spent 4 weeks along with his wife, Hope. So the name of his wife is Hope, and she is an English teacher. He went traveling along with her throughout of Western Europe. That is, he visited Germany, France, Spain, and Portugal. Travel is essential to me. My wife jokes about Travel Nate, an alternate version of me who is less harried, less tense, and more at ease. When I travel, I get headspace to reflect on my practice. I get time to read all the books I wanted to read during the school year. I feel like a yoke of grading and obligation is removed from my neck. I feel peace, something that is far too rare for people in the US, especially people of color, people in poverty, and even NFL quarterbacks. So here the writer explains that why he feels the need to go on this holiday. He says that he completely becomes more relaxed and he enjoys this holiday which he takes at the end of each year a lot. His wife always feels that the person who comes on the holiday is completely different from the person who she lives with during the rest of the year, because while he is on holiday he is much more relaxed and at ease. He says that when he is on this vacation of his, he feels as though he is completely free of all his responsibilities and he can now do whatever he feels like, especially spending time in reading and having space to think about various aspects of his life. He then goes on to talk about his other experiences. Early in our trip, after I posted a photo online, a colleague and mentor in the profession asked, "What does it feel like to be Black in Germany?" I responded, "I always feel more free when we travel, but knowing what's happening back home right now, even more so, it's hard to put into words. I feel Black plus carefree, and I haven't felt that way in a long, long time." So the writer, who is a Negro, that is Black in color, says that while he is on this holiday, sometimes people ask him, "How do you feel being a Black and being in Germany?" And the only word which comes to his mind is that he feels much more free. When I travel, my brain works differently. I see things here differently. My understanding of America is sharpened by even a brief absence from it. I believe that if you want to be truly awake, you have to leave home. I think most importantly, travel provides me with distance to consider my life back home, what I prioritize, my habits, my consumption, and my aspirations. Travel reminds me that there are better, smarter ways. So here the writer explains that while he is traveling, his brain works in a different manner. He is able to understand America in a much more better way, and that he feels that he is truly awake when he is away from home. Most importantly, he feels that while he is traveling, he is able to think more rationally about his own homeland. He also feels that traveling teaches him that there are better and smarter ways to do things. Next paragraph talks about how US media coverage is not right according to the writer. Travel reminds that US media coverage is problematic, and I need to seek and encourage my students to pursue alternative sources. I spent this summer watching France 24, their English language network, Deutsche Welle, Germany, and CNN International. I was struck by the expansive and nuanced nature of CNN International's coverage of events in the US and abroad. Over the last year in the US, CNN has distinguished itself with problematic coverage, commentary, and HR choices. But this summer reminded me that CNN hasn't forgotten how to do news. They choose to fill their US coverage with the likes of Ulf Blitzer, former Trump aide Corey Lewandowski, and Don Lemon. CNN gives their international audiences investigative reporting, searing documentaries, and in-depth analysis of events with historical context. We get clownish coverage, gigantic countdown clocks to trivial events, talking heads who are ideologues rather than experts, and massive chyrons that fill 1/3 of the screen, but don't actually tell you anything. We get louder, inferior, less informative coverage because that's what sells. So here the writer tells us that in the other countries, especially in France and in Germany, he felt that the news coverage was done in a very refined manner and that there was true journalism which was still taking place. But in USA, the kind of journalism which can be witnessed is very loud with very less information and coverage. He next talks about the role of law enforcement in a civil society. Travel reminds me of the proper role of law enforcement in a civil society. Police killings are a uniquely American problem, something I remind my students of while discussing civil liberties in government class. While we were abroad, at least 95 people were killed by US law enforcement. Victims 630 through 725 of this year. Travel reminds me that issues of race, justice, and policing should be at the forefront of many of our classes this year. So, while he was traveling, he realized that incidents of police killings are found majorly in America and is a particularly or peculiarly American problem. And he felt that more about on this issue should be discussed in the classroom. Just before I left for Europe, Minneapolis school cafeteria worker Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were killed by police. Both were killed at the end of what should have been routine encounters with law enforcement. These encounters were routine, all right, part of a routine that allows the normalized killing of unarmed Americans by people otherwise sworn to protect and serve them. This fall, students will show up to school in Minneapolis wondering where Mr. Castile went. This September, Castile and Sterling's children will be in our schools. These children, fatherless because of the actions of other agents of the state, will be in our classrooms. What will we say to them? How will we comfort them? So, the writer here now talks about a particular incident where the Minneapolis school cafeteria worker, that is by the name Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, who both used to work in the school canteen, they were killed by the police. And he says that now, how do we console the children of these people and how do we explain that the police, which are agents of the state, have themselves killed these unarmed people? He then goes on to talk about how traveling reminds him that there are better ways to do things. Travel reminds me there is a better way. Traffic stops should not end in murder. People should not be incarcerated for profit. Other industrialized nations don't fund local government programs through revenue from red light cameras placed largely in their poorest neighborhoods. They do not allow civil asset forfeiture, the practice of police seizing private property or funds they allege have been used in criminal activity for department use and budgets. These are our problems alone. So he says that when he visits these European countries, he realized that traffic and is a problem which is unique again to America. He said that generally when there is a traffic stop, many times in America, it ends in the killing of one or the other person. Also, he talks about how private property which has been seized during a criminal activity is generally used by the police for their department use. And this is not done in any other country. Travel reminds me I have nothing to fear from the other. We arrived in Europe 4 days after the attack in Nice. We expected to find anxiety and fear. We found none. Despite a very real threat from international terrorism, they do not live in constant fear. I want my students to inherit a world where they don't have to be afraid. So he talks here about how in the European countries, people are not constantly living in the fear of international terrorism, whereas in USA, they have to constantly deal with this. He hopes that his students are able to live in a world where they don't have to be afraid. Travel reminds me of the importance of our work. As an educator, I get to teach my students a series of lessons, academic or otherwise, about government, geography, character, and life. As we prepare to return to school, my travel has reminded me that we have an obligation to prepare our students to be active participants in civil society. We must model for them how to thoughtfully question authority. We must implore them to question the underlying and unstated premises of arguments they are presented with. We must push them to listen to understand rather than listening to refute. We must teach them to believe more in discourse and less in debate. We must teach them to love to read and to read to grow. So here he talks about how traveling has made him realize that as an educator, he has much more responsibility than just dissemination of knowledge. He talks about how he needs to teach his students not only certain lessons which have been prescribed in the syllabus, but also to prepare the students to become active participants of a civil society. He says that he needs to teach his students about how to listen so that they can understand rather than listening to oppose or argue with the other person. He also says that we need to teach our students to involve more in discussion rather than in debates. And we need to teach our students to learn to love to read and after reading to grow as an individual. This is the work of teaching. We get to help students on their paths. We get to leave our cognitive fingerprints and habits of inquiry on the next generation. We get to plant seeds. Helping kids become curious about the world isn't on my evaluation, but it's probably the most important thing I do. This work can't be tested or assessed by the SBAC. It's too important for that. It doesn't fit neatly into an ELA standard, but it's why we do what we do. So he says that as a teacher, it is my prime responsibility that I create a responsible next generation. And how I do this cannot be judged by any other parameters which are fixed by the government. So students, in this particular video, we have tried to understand this lesson, which is a travelogue, where The writer Nate Bowling describes how traveling has helped him evolve as a person and also realize his responsibility as a teacher. I hope you like this video. Thank you.